go to on Wednesday, April 16th. And we're pulling together a joint board of directors meeting of Clackamas and Sandy Fire. We always do the pledge of allegiance. Do we do that
Yep.
still? Because okay, it's not on our agenda. Okay, let's do the pledge of allegiance. Yeah, it's behind you there. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
The agenda.
No changes to the agenda.
We will have time for questions after these are, but that's, I know there's a request for that, so.
Yep.
Okay. All right, those together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. With this, I'm going to defer here to Steve Peters to give introductions and what we're doing.
Sure. Okay, well, so we have some presentations of the polling results that happened over a few weeks ago. We have Chris and Lindsay from Coastline here, and on the Zoom, we have John from DHM, and he will be doing a major part of the presentation. And I think that we could turn it over to Chris to see if there's any Coastline updates, and then he can kind of walk us through the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and bookend, John, if that's all right.
Perfect.
Shelby, do you have the slides that I?
Thank you.
I think Shelby could pull those out. And I'm just gonna cover the first, well, I guess 3 slides if you include the title slide.
Which one did you want to go over first?
The slide deck, which is the 3rd one from the left on your selection.
That one?
That one right there, that's perfect. Great. So yes, good to see everybody again. Chris Edmonds with Coastline Public Affairs and Lindsay Hendren with Coastline Public Affairs. I'm just gonna talk for less than a minute here, hopefully, and then we'll bring John on from DHM and he'll get to the stuff that we really want to hear. If we go to the second slide. And just as a quick reminder for this group, our group tends to operate with a set of 5 principles when it comes to measures that impact tax revenues within any local jurisdiction. This is based off of exhaustive research that was conducted a little over a decade ago by a national group called Hanover Strategies that did a full audit of what passes, what fails, what are the key characteristics that influence community support for any measure. And these 5 rules basically boil down to demonstrating the sufficient need, making sure that every single voter sees something that's in it for them in terms of a direct benefit, that costs within any measure, if there's a cost impact to it, which we know that an annexation measure would have a cost impact to it, that it's viewed as essential, and that it's not for, something like a, new 3-story slide at the water park. One that we commonly see that fails are stadium upgrades at high school football stadiums, things like that. Number 4, it's a combination of trust, has the referring jurisdiction exhibited good fiduciary behavior over the years, and they've been wise stewards of resources. But also that community involvement component of have they involved key stakeholders in the community at the important steps along the way. And then number 5, that rates are affordable for voters. Shelby, could we go to slide number 3? So I'm going to turn it over to John Borvik here to talk about a public survey that we conducted that DHM ran in March 2025. I want to highlight a few key numbers. John will dive into this a little bit more. But right off the bat, this survey found that the measure starts in a really good place. And so we can dive into what we do with that on the back end. But we start at 70% support, just asking the generic question without any education about supporting an annexation between Sandy Fire District and Clackamas Fire District. And then when we run respondents, there was 200 respondents. John can answer lots of questions about what that means. When we run respondents through various educational components as well as message testing, and we test at the end of the survey, we find the support actually grows to 80%. We also found that right off the bat in that survey with no education, Clackamas Fire had an approval rating in the Sandy Fire District of 91%. I've never tested a government entity and seen it hit that level of support. So we're starting from a pretty good place here. But with that, I want to hand it over to John, and I think he may have some slides that he wants to run with, but let's go ahead and put him up on the screen.
Yes, let me end my share here. Or here, you can end me maybe. There we go. So now you can take over.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
All right. You can see the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's do it. I'm going to try to get through the beginning. So I'm John Horvick, the Senior Vice President of DHM Research. For those who aren't familiar with us, we're an independent, nonpartisan public opinion and policy firm. Yeah, that means we're pollsters. We're based out of here in Oregon. We've been in business in Oregon since 1977. We had an opportunity, or have had the opportunity, over the years to work. It's probably not true if you think of every single community out there, but we've worked with many communities, big and small, on all sorts of issues, whether it's education, transportation, healthcare, public safety. We've had an opportunity to talk to folks about things that happen in the community. We work on a lot of ballot measure issues as well, particularly for local governments, to help support whether it's funding measures or, in this case, an annexation. I'm going to walk through the survey results that Chris teed up for us. First, just like from my perspective, what we were trying to do, what was our purpose here? We wanted to gauge support for the Clackamas Fire District's annexation to the Sandy Fire District. If this goes to the ballot, are they going to say yes or no? We wanted as well to understand sort of these talking points, these proof points, these messages that are going to be most impactful, most persuasive to voters. If we need to move them to yes from being uncertain or no, or if we need to hold on to them, what should we be saying? As well as who should be saying them. We'll have a little bit of that as well, I think, with the understanding of the data. Of course, we wanted to understand how folks feel about fire services in Sandy by Clackamas Fire, and understand top priorities for fire and emergency services in the district, in the Sandy district. So this is both the policy sort of type of question, as well as a communication finding. What do people want you to do, and then how can you talk about it? So it's going to be heard by the community. So that's what we did. How did we do it? So this is what we call a hybrid survey, meaning we use multiple different approaches to reach people. In traditional surveys, you would call people up, ask them questions about this, that, or the other thing. And of course, we still do some of that. So your community members are absolutely, their phones rang. We reached those who we could, had an interviewer administer the questionnaire and get their feedback. But some people don't want to be contacted that way. And it's important to have other ways to reach them. More and more, we're blending in text messaging, where people are text a link to take the survey. Most everybody does that on a smartphone nowadays, but they could send that link to another device if that was their preference. So whether you are someone who wants to engage with the live interview, or someone who doesn't want to be contacted or pick up when someone's calling, regardless what type of person you are, we had a way to reach them. This was conducted mid to late March, so these data are still very fresh. We kept people engaged for about 13 minutes. Whenever we're doing a survey, we pay real close attention to the demographic profile of our participants. We know that some groups of people are eager to raise their hand when they're called and answer some questions, and some people aren't. And the types of people who take surveys more readily are different than others. Women tend to take surveys more than men. People who are college educated more than those with less education. Homeowners more than renters. And we understand this going into a project. And so we always set quotas by our key demographic variables that we know tend to shape opinions. So age, race, gender, ethnicity, education level, income, political affiliation, of course, That's important to how people think about local government and their trust in it and what they wanted it to do. And so we pay attention to that. We called people from the list of registered voters. And so everybody's tied back to the voter file as well. The sample size in this project is 200. The sample size is a function of, budget, of course. The more people you talk to, the more cost that goes into that. It as well as a function of how big the community is and what's feasible. Given the population that we're dealing with, we aim for and we accomplished a sample size of 200. Now, we could have got a bigger sample size, but a bigger sample size would have not been a representative of the community. So we're trying to balance a sample size that's feasible in the community and still being representative of it, not over indexing on those groups that are easy to reach. And so this is where what we're able to do in this community. The margin of error is 6.9%. In some projects that matters a lot, as you're going to see in these results, they're pretty overwhelming. Not to say we should discount the margin of error, but even if we accounted for the margin of error in a negative direction, the numbers are still going to be very favorable, as you're going to see. So I'm going to move forward. Of course, people have questions about methodology. I'll be happy to answer them. We did begin the survey by talking about services and get the folks' reaction to them. The first thing we actually did in the survey that was just ask, direction of the community. Are things heading in the right direction? Are they off on the wrong track? This is a classic question that pollsters love to ask. Part of the reason I like to ask is that we have comparisons to other places and other times, and we can get a real sense of how this community is, what's the mood of the community. The other is that when you do a survey, it's really important to start with something that identifies that it's about community issues. It's easy to answer because if we ask a question like that and they answer it, they're pretty likely to finish the survey. And so this is a question that's kind of standard in the industry: right direction, wrong track. So in this community, 49% of folks saying things are heading in the right direction, 41% wrong track. So plus 8 percentage points between the two. We do this sort of work a lot. Just to give you some context, right now in Oregon, about 35% of Oregonians say that the state's heading in the right direction. And so, we're about plus 14, 15 percentage points above sort of where the state is as a whole. It's really difficult to get high numbers nowadays. People just, for reasons that extend far beyond your community, far beyond Oregon, just to sort of things about our culture, it's difficult to get people to be positive about public issues, governmental issues. 49% right direction, 41% wrong track is a pretty decent number nowadays, and certainly better than we're seeing statewide. We then ask, here are some issues in your community. How concerned are you about them or not? This here's a little bit to validate that the service that you provide is, in fact, a high level of concern in the community, as well as if there's differences among some of these things, these sorts of emergencies, maybe we would talk about the benefits of annexation somewhat differently. It's really clear when we ask people about major wildfires, major winter storms, major flooding. If you look at that major wildfires, this is a community that's concerned, and it makes sense, of course. We have that a lot of the urban wildland interface right up against forest lands, and property is at risk. Plus, we've just had a lot of wildfires, and so it's very much top of mind. Of course, we don't want wildfires. We don't want people to be concerned about wildfires, but to the extent that they are, being able to tie back the benefits of annexation to the community to help protect against, prevent property damage, respond quickly to wildfires is really capturing where people are at. And then you see these deltas here between winter storms and major flooding. We included winter storms and major flooding because they can happen, but also just to give us a sense, a barometer, something to compare major wildfires against. And we can really see by doing that the intensity of concern about major wildfires. Then we ask folks just, are you satisfied or not about some of the services you're receiving? And here, this is on a scale from very satisfied, that's that dark green, somewhat satisfied, that's that lighter green. And then somewhat dissatisfied would be a pale orange or color, and then the very dissatisfied would be a darker orange. And so we asked about fire response for homes and buildings, emergency response for medical needs, fire response to wildfires, emergency response for rescues, fire prevention and education, and then the operation of the Furwood Road Volunteer Firefighter Station. Get to that one in a second. But before you get to pay attention to any of the particular numbers, just, look at the overall sort of image that you see in front of you. A lot of green. It's a lot of satisfaction. You are providing a service that is valued and that people feel that it's been delivered well. At the very top here is fire response to homes and buildings, where 50% are very satisfied, 43% are somewhat satisfied. So, gosh darn it, 93%. I mean, truly, you can't get better than that. I mean, just there's always going to be somebody who says dissatisfied. These are sort of the highest levels you can get. If you look at a couple down, fire response for wildfires, there's an overall level of satisfaction that's high, but there's a pretty big drop from 50% at one at the top of our chart here to 31% fire response for wildfires. It's a 19 percentage point difference in that very satisfied. The overall satisfaction is still very high, but the intensity drops a little bit. At the bottom here, operation of Furwood Road Volunteer Fire Station. It's not that people are dissatisfied. Just a lot of folks didn't know. 33% said that they weren't sure. They're not familiar with it. They're not tracking it. It's not something on their mind. So it's not dissatisfaction. So all these are really great. Again, as Chris was pointing out, those sort of metrics for success. People value service. They trust you. And they think you're doing a good job in delivering the services that are important to them. We did ask, impressions of Clackamas, move some things on my screen here, of Clackamas Fire. 91% said they had a positive impression. 38% strong, 53% somewhat. And then if we ask us some follow-up questions like, why do we feel positive? Now, some of these are just general, like people like fire, they like fire services. Maybe they haven't had interaction or couldn't say something specific. They're just giving you the benefit of the doubt. Just sort of general sort of comments, say they're doing a good job. A third, though, specifically mentioned response times. And when you have an open-ended question like this, anything that gets above 20%, more than 1 out of 5 people are saying the same thing. That's something to pay attention to, either because you're doing a great job or maybe there's some concern that people are raising. But a third of folks, 32%, are identifying response times as a reason to be satisfied. Then we see a little bit a drop. But some other things that are mentioned is community involvement, good training. I haven't heard anything bad, and then just a hodgepodge of other sorts of things. Again, in this world where people often don't give local government or government in general the benefit of doubt, we're dealing with a community where 91% have a positive impression of the work that you do. All right, so that's kind of big picture. That's what people are feeling. Now, given these positive sentiments, given the satisfaction of the service delivery, maybe it's not going to be a surprise, but how much positive reaction we see to these ballot questions. So we did this several ways where we continue to feed people information. And then you're going to see the support and opposition move a little bit, mostly towards support, as they get more information. But the first thing that we said, without much background, was currently Sandy Fire District contracts with Clackamas Fire District to provide all Sandy's fire and emergency services. Sandy Fire District and Clackamas Fire District are considering asking voters to annex Sandy Fire District so they operate as one fire district. Note that we did include the language annex in there. We wanted to be intentional. We had some worry that would be a damaging word. Annexation can seem scary, but it's in there, as it probably will be in an actual ballot language. But then we asked, if the election today, would you support or oppose Clackamas Fire District annexing Sandy Fire District? We're at 70% support, 17% opposed, 13% don't know. It's not an absolute certainty, but sort of the general rule of thumb in a survey, in this initial uninformed cold test, we usually tell our clients you want to be 60% or above, because it is more likely than not that that support will decline as you move towards election day, particularly if there's an organized opposition campaign. And so you want to start above 50% to try to protect yourself against erosion. So you can stay above a majority come election day. The other thing I would say is we always pay attention to that ratio between strong support and strong opposition. So here we're at 25% strong support versus just 9% strong opposed, right? So these, our sort of metrics are, we're well above that 60% threshold, and we're nearly 3-to-1 on strong support versus strong oppose, which is where we want to be. These are great numbers out of the gate. Now, this isn't the whole story. People would be getting more information, and so we tried to give people some more information. Oh, excuse me, before I get to that, just a little bit on the politics here. This one did stand out to us. We typically see these big differences between Democrats and Republicans. This isn't necessarily a funding measure, although there's dollars impacted. We'll get to that in a second. But it's notable the Democrats and Republicans, there's no difference there. Where we see the highest level of support is non-affiliated voters. I'd say in questions like this, it's not obvious to me that non-affiliated voters should be more supportive or less supportive. In this case, we're seeing that they're more supportive. Now, come in an election, the ratio of Democrats and Republicans may be weighted more towards partisans, D's and R's, and non-affiliated voters. But here we're getting that good, strong support across all political affiliations, and especially among non-affiliated voters. Now, this isn't what we gave them initially. Isn't the whole story. There is some dollar implications, some budgetary tax implications with this as well. We wanted to inform people about that and see what happened to support. So we told them the Sandy Fire District has a property tax rate of $2.18 per 1,000 of assessed property value that it uses to pay for fire services provided by Clackamas Fire District. If voters support annexation, the property tax rate for residents in Sandy Fire District would be raised to $2.40 per 1,000 to match the property tax rate of Clackamas Fire District. This would cost a typical homeowner about $5 additional per month. So here we're telling them that there's a tax implication. Your taxes are going up. And we told them how much. We helped translate this rate into a figure that's more understandable. Not surprisingly, once we put a dollar amount on it, support did erode slightly from 70% to 63%. So we're still above that threshold, above 60% they like us to be at. Now that strong opposition rose to 19%, and the strong support ebbed a little bit to 22%, but we still have more strong support than we do strong opposition. So there's still twice as much overall support as there is opposition, and strong support is still somewhat greater than opposition, even when we told them that there's going to be a cost. But even that's not the whole story. We're not even talked about really the benefits yet. So here we tried to give more information about why and how people are going to be impacted. So this is the start of this sort of series of questions. But here, this is the information we provided. In 2023, Clackamas Fire District entered into a contract with the Sandy Fire District to provide fire and emergency services to our community. So we're telling people this is a continuation. This is not brand new. We're continuing something that has been agreed to in the past. So that's sort of what that first sentence is setting up. And then it says, before the contract, Sandy Fire District struggled to meet the needs of our community regarding response to large fires and major medical emergencies. Remember, large wildfires, major wildfires is a high level of concern for the community. So this need was being met by this relationship. By partnering with the Clackamas Fire, our community has now expanded firefighting capabilities and necessary equipment. So we sort of told them, hey, there's a history here, it met a need, and we're providing better service because of it. Now we get that support up to 76%, that strong support at 25%, and that strong opposition just 6%. Okay, so we lost a little support when we just told them there's a cost, and then we gained more support when we told them a little bit about the history and how the community has benefited. Then we gave people some more information. And again, the language here is on the left, and it is the current contract between Sandy Fire District and Clackamas Fire District is underfunded for the future and will require either cuts to services and equipment for Sandy residents or an incremental increase in funding. the Sandy Fire District Board of Directors supports annexation to ensure fire services in the community are fully funded. So now we're putting a little pressure on them. Hey, so there's a problem that we need to rectify. There's a problem that we see coming down the road. And this is going to be a solution for it. And trusted people in your community, the Sandy Fire District Board of Directors has given their thumbs up. So once people had that information, that total support remains at 76%. That strong support goes even higher. Now we're at 32% strong support. So again, these are really good numbers. Then here we really sort of like weighed into to our participants. We said, here are all these great things that you're going to get. So here are some additional benefits to the annexation that would provide for a community in Sandy: stable and predictable funding, better equipment. You're going to ensure that Sandy residents receive the same level of services as the rest of the district. It's going to increase rescue services from 12 hours to 24-hour shifts, provide better coordination, quicker access to specially designed fire and emergency service vehicles for remote off-road access. All these great benefits. Now we get to 79% support, 33% strong. I mean, these are, again, home run sort of numbers. And then I think this is the last one we did before we did the final retest. We told folks in 2023, voters in Clackamas Fire District approved additional investments to enhance fire and emergency services, including additional staffing and services in rural areas. If voters in Sandy Fire District support annexation, they will receive these enhanced services without being required to pay additional property taxes. So now we're telling them there's this tax benefit by saying yes. And they will be ensured the opportunity to vote on any future funding measures in the district, as well as representation on the Clackamas Fire Board of Directors. Now it's at 79%, 34% strong. These are great numbers. So then after all that sort of information, we just went back to that original question, which is sort of that kind of, as you'd see like in that ballot sort of caption. This is re-asking that initial question that we did at the beginning, and basically where are you at now? So remember, we started at 70% support. We end at 80% support, so we gained 10 percentage points. That strong support went from 25 to 33.
I can do this every day.
Hey, John, all right, we are gonna need to go back,
3 slides or 4 slides?
We lost internet.
We lost internet connection.
Perfect, all right, I think you just wrapped that up, this slide, yep.
Okay, well,
The additional capabilities slide.
I got to repeat some good news. So you got to the previous slide. Then, so just continuing on the story, we gave people more information, and part of the information we gave them was the current contract between the Sandy Fire District and Clackamas Fire District is underfunded for the future and require either cuts to services and equipment for Sandy residents or an incremental increase in funding. The Sandy Fire District Board of Directors supports annexation to ensure fire service in the community is fully funded. So we're telling them, hey, gang, there's this future funding challenge. This is going to meet it. The Sandy Board of Directors is giving their thumbs up. Trusted people in their community are supporting it. And we get to 76% support, 32% strong. And then this was the one where we gave people, we really just tried to lean into our participants and say, hey, there is just a slew of benefits that you're going to get. Stable and predictable funding, better equipment, ensures that Sandy gets the same level of services as the rest of the district, going to increase rescue services from 12 hours to 24-hour shifts, better coordination, better equipment, particularly for remote access, off-road access types of events. And knowing that, we get to 79% support and 33% strong support. Once we gave people all this information, we went back to the original question, kind of that basic question. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one more here. I apologize. One other piece of information we gave is that voters in the Clackamas Fire District approved additional investments to enhance fire and emergency services in 2023. If voters in the Sandy Fire District support annexation, they will receive these enhanced services without being required to pay additional property taxes for them. And they will be ensured the opportunity to vote at any future funding measures in the district. So basically, hey, Sandy voters, if you say yes to this, you're going to get these great services. If there's going to be any future asks, you're going to have an opportunity to say yes or no on them. Knowing that, again, we stay at that real high 79% overall support, 34% strong. So then, after all this stuff where we're trying to give people information, educate them about the measure, see sort of how they move when they get more information, we go back to the original question, kind of the basic question, which is just, hey, Sandy Fire District and Clackamas Fire District are considering asking voters to annex Sandy Fire District so they operate as one fire district. Support that or not? We started at 70%. We started at 70% support. We end at 80. Now, truly, like 80, you're really bumping up against the ceiling of what is possible. You're not going to get to 100. It's impossible, right? You're not going to get to 99 or 98. These sorts of numbers are impossible. 80% is really sort of bumping up against what's sort of the maximum that you can get in a survey sort of like this. And also, we went from 25% strong support in the initial test to 33% strong in the post. So that's where we are with like how people are thinking about the ballot measure. I won't go over this, but basically support increases across all groups. We lose a couple ticks with non-affiliated voters, but remember they started really, really, really high. So I wouldn't get too anxious about that. We see even more support among Democrats, which is kind of what you would expect. But basically, we see increased support across the board. Just a little bit about messaging. So even though we're in a really great place to start, still you want to communicate to the community between now and election day, or have your partners be communicating to the community between now and election day, and what should they be saying? I'm not going to go through all of these. It's in the report. These are a whole bunch of messages, information that we asked folks about. The full language is there. On the left hand, we have this sort of this shorthand. Otherwise, it wouldn't fit into my charts that are coming up. But firefighters support it. There's going to be better response times, get access to remote areas. Insurance rates are at risk if we don't address the current situation. There's a positive existing relationship. Community leaders, the boards support this. Again, wildfires, we know how important that it is. Message around that. And us talking about the service agreement itself. So we asked if these were convincing or not convincing reasons to support annexation, to support the ballot measure. And again, without paying attention to any particular numbers, we see that all these do well. So you can use all of these. Like there's nothing on here that says that any of these messages are risky or shouldn't be saying. And also, you have to make choices and priorities. We would call out a couple at least that stand out. The firefighters support it. Now, this is the firefighters. This isn't the elected board members. People really trust their firefighters in their community. We see this over and over again that they're trusted messengers. They're the ones who are delivering the service. And to the extent that they are talking about it positively, that is a huge win for this, or huge support for any sort of future campaign. Response times and wildfire safety. Again, we know, particularly when it comes to fire, the response times are a key motivator for the community. Whether it's annexation or it's a bond measure for a new fire station. Increased response times, maintaining fast response times is always motivating. And we know this community is particularly concerned about wildfire risk. And so being able to talk about how this is going to benefit around those two things, really, really important. And then these other ones do great too. Again, there's nothing concerning about any of these. I'd say those two probably stand out the most. They're over 80%. If we just focus in on swing voters, so these are voters who said that they either somewhat supported, somewhat opposed, or they were unsure in that initial test. So these are the voters who aren't committed yes, committed no people. These are they're a little bit soft, or they were unsure. And we just wanted to pull out these top two messages: firefighter support and response times. Also work with that type of voter that we need to be most attuned to their concerns and how to communicate with them. because they're the ones that are more likely to move. Like there's some strong supporters, you'll never have to say anything to them. They're in your camp. There's some, not many, strong opponents who, no matter what you say, they're not going to be yes voters. So focusing on that sort of swing voter, these top messages work especially well with them too. So like these are the two that really sort of stand out, and probably the most effective to use. And if you have to prioritize the sorts of things to say, these would be it. And you could just real quickly, you can see that not only with swing voters, but across key demographic groups, party, gender, area, income, age, these are strong, effective messages. Again, this is the two messages that are showing here, the firefighter support and response times for wildfire safety. Again, the individual percentages are at that point. The important point is like, these are two messages that work with swing voters, work across all key demographics, and are probably the priority to use. And then we finished up by just asking people just general priorities. So we did ask like top priorities for fire and emergency services. We asked people to sort of evaluate these. Again, this is both maybe some policy insight for you, but also, thinking about how to talk about the benefits of annexation. Again, response times for medical emergencies really stands out. We know with response times are really key for firefighter and emergency services. And then there's a pretty big drop. Protecting homeowners against increases to home insurance. I mean, it's the number 2 here, but there's a pretty big gap between first and second. Third is helping property owners protect themselves against fire emergencies. Fourth, response times to wildfires. Remote access to medical emergencies and remote access to remote areas for fire services. I think that's it. I mean, the big picture takeaway here is you're in a very strong position. You're in a strong position because you're trusted. You're in a strong position because you're delivering services in a way that makes people satisfied. You start with strong support overall. A tiny little bit of apprehension around the tax rate, but clear sorts of things I think to communicate about that. And the messaging really focusing on response times and wildfire protection. And the more you can have your frontline firefighters out there delivering that message, the stronger place you'll be. So I'm going to stop. I'll entertain any questions that you have, and certainly Chris and others can weigh in too. If you want to correct anything I had to say or add to it, please do.
Anyone have questions for John on the survey while we have him here?
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood. Did one of your questions to them indicate that there would be no tax increase to Sandy persons, taxpayers?
Chris might be the best one to describe this, but this is for, I can go back to it. Let me go back to it.
It's one of the ones where you were goosing the numbers up by throwing out new things, saying, well, if we do this, how about it? If we do that.
Oh, yeah, I can explain that. So we informed them that there would be a tax increase
There would be a significant tax.
of 22 cents per thousand.
Minimum.
And that was the second question that we asked to them. So we first gave them information where we just asked the question of the overall, what we would expect to see on the ballot as closely as we could. Do you support annexation? Was question number 1. Question number 2, we informed them, we said, this measure would have a tax increase of 22 cents per thousand, which would cost the average resident in Sandy, the average homeowner, approximately $5 a month, which is the number that we got from the county assessor's office. And then we saw support decline from 70% to 63% based on that question alone. Then we walked through a series of other questions, which one that you're referencing is related to the levy, which is if Clackamas Fire were to annex the Sandy Fire District territory, it would only assess the base tax rate of $2.40 versus the rest of the district, which is paying $2.92 with both the base tax rate and the levy rate on top of it. So the question was saying that residents in the Sandy Fire District would receive the same level of enhanced service benefits upon annexation currently received by every other resident in Clackamas Fire District, but they would not pay that levy rate, and they would have the opportunity to vote on any future funding measures. So that was the question we asked.
Okay.
So that, I mean, that's a hard area to, because the reality is, could be. And more than likely will be more like a 75% increase, which is about 30% of the taxable rate. And that's a whole different question. I know you can't say that because you don't know what the future is gonna predict, but that's probably what the reality is going to be.
You know, I honestly, and we can't say it for the reason that you said, which is that we don't know what the future holds. And so we can only communicate with voters in what we can, you know, reasonably ascertain to be true. And, you know, the reality is that a renewal of the county's, or the fire district levy would take place in 2027, and that would require a vote. But we're also cognizant of the fact that if an annexation occurs, we're bringing 17,000 new voters or 17,000 new residents into that mix who are going to be casting a ballot on that. So that's a level of, you know, a mix of a new population that would have the ability to potentially swing the dial one way or the other. We also have no idea what the economy is going to look like at that point, what, you know, the world is going to look like at that point. I could sit here and, you know, hypothesize any number of crazy scenarios.
When is the levy up for renewal?
2027. And so what we tried to do with that question, and again, I don't think that this is going to be a key messaging thrust for us, because we, you know, what we sort of found was that it fell very squarely within the mix of other, you know, positive messages. But we can definitely include the information about it and provide that with voters. Yeah.
Can I just clarity, organizationally, 2027, we're gonna go back out, it expires in 28.
Yeah.
But we're going back out, so there's a glide path with that.
Apologies.
Sorry, we would be coming to the electeds to suggest going back out. The electeds would still have to approve it, but it expires May of 2028. We're looking at May of 2027, so there's a glide path into that.
I always peg elections by the age of my children, and I remember that my youngest daughter was 1 when we passed. So I was trying to
Yeah,
reverse it.
sorry.
Planned birthdays.
Yeah, exactly.
First of all, well, I think the whole board here, we are supportive of it, so. What I'm gonna phrase up will sound negative, and then, but. Talking about this, my fiduciary right is to, you know, represent the voters, get the information out there. And I'm trying to figure out a way to package it. So that in 27, that somebody doesn't come back to me and say, hey, you never told me about this, okay? Because if I was out there trying to sell it, I wouldn't sell it just like this, but okay, yeah, it's gonna go up. The likelihood, okay, in 27 is that they're gonna get passed again, pass the levy again. It passed, you know, in 23 at this level, okay? I would expect to see that happening, so just to forewarn you that when you sign up for this, this is what is probably gonna happen. Now, I think that's a fair, I wouldn't go about it that way, but I think that's the message that I want to get behind to tell the voters that it's not just 22 cents, more than likely, right? And I'm definitely not the right person to package that and sell it, but that's just me.
Yeah,
So
I don't think that that would be, you know, inappropriate for you in your elected capacity to do that. From an organizational standpoint, we couldn't say something to the effect of, you know, we expect, you know, our levy to pass again, because we can't. The kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to local option levies is you just have to go out every 5 years and ask for that renewal. And, you know, we were working with a 911 district and brought in after they had successfully renewed their levies for 5 straight 5-year cycles and then lost one. And were completely apoplectic, you know, and unsure about what to do at that point. So, you know, these things do occasionally not get renewed. When you bring 17,000 new voters into the mix, and Nick knows this off the top of his head. Nick, it was 62% that we passed it by, okay. You know, you bring 17,000 new voters in, the economy can swing one way or the other, and all of a sudden that starts to get a little bit thin, which is why the district is planning to go out a year early to do that. What I think would be accurate from an organizational standpoint to say is Clackamas Fire District is not going to levy the current levy rate on Sandy Fire District voters upon annexation. But that Sandy Fire voters would have the opportunity, just like the rest of the district, to vote on whether or not the current levy would be renewed. Likely a vote in 2027 for renewal in 2028.
I think it's also important to know that the contract ends in 2027, 2028.
And so
And so we don't know what the future holds.
For contract
For Sandy.
No, it's a 7-year contract, so Gladstone is what ends in 27. This one is this is a 7-year.
I can be the lone person out here, but I think I understand what you're saying. But at the same time, to my friends all, I just, with transparency, this is probably what's gonna happen. Okay, that's there, and maybe somewhere in between the two is to get that message across to the folks, to let them know what's really happening, and yeah. And the other one is to go along with it is, when we come through the benefits of the levy, I never thought Sandy would get those benefits until we were participating in the levy.
Yeah, so the reality is once you're annexed into the organization, it's one holistic organization, and we get to service the areas of greatest impact because we're all in it together. Versus currently right now, what we're able to be able to staff or fund is out of what your current revenue stream is. That's the reality of it. You're able for us, we are now able to fund based on we're able to allocate and resource based on a regional versus the local.
And Ron, I would say that, to the overarching issue that you're raising here, you'll see in Lindsay's materials that what we're trying to do is just provide some alignment in the messaging in terms of providing that information that the residents of Sandy Fire District would pay the same rate as the overall Clackamas Fire District moving forward.
Yeah, and just listening to this, is there an opportunity, and I don't know if this is really where you guys will be able to answer this, right? So if I look at the board number 7 on the cost impact, is there an opportunity in our open houses to have a line in there that educates currently what that there's the levy, and then the fire district is looking to go out in 2027, to which the citizens have the opportunity to vote for. And I think that covers the transparency level that Ron is speaking to and that Mark's speaking to, because that's really, there's no hiding anything. This is just the reality. This is the education. This is what's.
If you don't get it out now, you risk people thinking that you get it from.
Exactly.
That's the worst case.
Exactly.
People are gonna wanna know
Exactly.
what they're getting for their money. It's like, just the merge or the annexation.
Yep.
It's gonna bring in rough math, like extra 500,000 a year. They're gonna wanna know what they're gonna get for that.
Yep.
And then you got a levy renewal, that's gonna bring another $1 million, right? So what's Sandy voters gonna get?
Yep.
For $1.5 million extra a year?
Yeah, and organizationally, that would be a messaging that we would come out in 2027. For this, what we would focus on is where the service levels would increase for the 240 per thousand.
So let me jump on that. So I'm gonna go back a little bit here. I'm gonna put my boring fire district hat on, and Brian, I'm gonna need your help to correct me when I'm wrong. First of all, the numbers here are phenomenally a lot better they were than when we were with boring Clackamas thing that happened there. Okay, the numbers are a lot better. But the thing is we as elected officials, we have to be cognizant and transparent about the money, how much it's going to cost. Absolutely, 100% agree with that. But so we got to remember the service delivery aspect of this. I mean, we're delivering a service. There's a service that's going to be coming that for what Sandy Fire can deliver without Clackamas, what they can with Clackamas. And I think that that needs to be as transparent as well of how that service delivery to the Sandy community will change. I'm putting my boring fire hat on. We went for basically the same money, staffing one station most of the time, to staffing a station full-time with 4 people and a paramedic, opening station 19. And then as time went on, found out there was some efficiencies that we didn't know about because things changed, that we were able to work with you guys and open station 18. And so those efficiencies for service delivery was huge and to the whole community. So I think we certainly need to worry about the money, but we also have to realize what are the citizens receiving for that money, as you were alluding to, what wildland response, ALS response, community paramedic, low acuity response. There's a lot here. Water tenders, all of that stuff comes with that 260 per thousand as part of it.
But they're getting that with the contract for them too.
We're getting it now.
Yeah, they're getting it with the contract, so
Yeah.
what is the
You
extra
gotta
money?
stay with that.
Right.
Because otherwise you confuse people on that, because when I read the slides up there and it said that a couple things, what's the need? Well, currently, what we're getting right now under contract, not a lot is going to change. Unless somebody tells me, unless I'm.
No, I think you would increase 12-hour capabilities to 24-hour capabilities
Right,
is what the testing question was.
and that's debatable to me whether
Of course,
that even makes sense right now, and I think it will in the future, I just don't know right now.
but what it does provide us is the opportunity to increase staffing. It truly does, whatever avenue. I'm not gonna ever come out and say, hey,
Promise you're gonna do something.
I'm not gonna promise you that there's gonna be a ladder company responding out of
I
here.
understand.
But what I would promise is, hey, there's gonna be an increased service level, staffing level that we were able to provide. Like inside baseball, we know what's needed out here. I'm just not gonna come out and promise, hey, it's gonna be X, it's gonna be Y. What I'm gonna promise you is it's gonna be an increased, more firefighters than what you currently have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's kind of the messaging that I would have to.
Or if some other financial needs that we don't see come about, they can go the other way.
That's exactly
Any other place in the district.
That's it. I just don't want to pigeonhole.
Right.
When you guys were asking the questions, were they all yes or no? I'm curious, like, the total no voter or people that were anti, what were their reasons? Did they say, was it like the esticated thing? Was it they're just feel overtaxed? Was it, I mean, do you guys have like
Yeah, so
stuff written out that
we actually had very few, and John can answer this question, but I just wanted to touch base on a couple of things. So we had very few no strong opposition responses. And the ability to actually were so small in terms of the sample size that it becomes really meaningless to try to understand why they're opposed to it. Instead, what we were able to get a larger sample on were the reasons for support. Like John was saying, we typically don't see surveys like this that are weighted so heavily in terms of community support around something. I did just want to reflect just a little bit, just clear, because you all have hired us to advise you around how to engage with the community, build support, and ultimately if you decide to pass an annexation measure. And I did want to say that I think it's really important to be accurate and to tell the full story, but there's a couple things I would caution you. One is you have to eliminate complexity when you're communicating with the voters. So the conversation that I'm hearing in here, I think is incredibly valid, but it will not be one that we see move wide swaths of the 17,000 folks that are under the rooftops here. So we need to keep things simple. In fact, what you saw were nearly a dozen top performing messages, which means that our job is actually really difficult in terms of choosing what we even talk about, because you can only hold somebody's attention for so long when it comes to a political issue like this, right? So, you know, I think that where you're engaging with those important stakeholders that, you know, who kind of have a high information need around what's going to happen, I think that, you know, having, you know, very transparent conversations is good. But if you're gonna talk about the cost impact that's potential down the road in 2028, you also, in fairness, if you're gonna speculate on that, need to speculate about the cost impact of going out for renewal of that contract, right? Which would be, you're going to, you know, you're just as likely to either pay the levy rate, or you're gonna pay the same exact tax rate in terms of renewing the contract, or see a fairly dramatic cut in your service levels.
I like that,
Right.
like I said, is, like Jake, going back on the comments is. We love the relationship, okay, that we have going on and fully support it. And I wasn't trying to say that should be the only thing, I'm just trying to figure out with the group here, how do we package that up a little bit so that it's in there. And, you know, getting into the 52 cents, blah, 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 and all this, I understand the complexity issue. Again, I'm definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed, that's why you guys are here to help us shape this stuff together. But again, I just don't wanna have it that it wasn't brought up to the voters, okay? That was there, and I said it to Nick a long time ago, the board is when we went into here, is everything is so great, right? It's been so much better, service levels, response times, right around, so why change? Okay, that's kind of thing is, to get across to the voters that I represent is, you know, everything's pretty good. I mean, it's way better than it was before. So,
Yeah, the survey would say that people think that, you know, you've done a good job in terms of this contract and then, you know, the services are good. I think to get to that, when Lindsay has her, when Lindsay walks through the boards that we've created for an open house, or at least the draft conceptual boards. As Nick had mentioned, we can add a line into the bottom paragraph of slide 7 on Lindsay's that actually reflects the cost of the Clackamas Fires levy, as well as the timeline for a potential renewal, so folks can have that information like right on the board and be able to see it.
well, and then just kind of myself on it is going through letting people, I mean, I view right now that Clackamas Fire District is kind of subsidizing their service. Okay, that's there, and letting people know that if we don't do something in a few years, we're gonna have an even a bigger problem, right?
With the respondents, did we track what were rural respondents and who were more urban at all?
And there was on there.
Was that on there? I couldn't see all
Did
of
we
it.
lose John or?
John, no, he's still there, I think.
Yeah. Yep, I'm still here. We tracked sort of within the city, outside the city. We don't see big differences. And partly we don't see big differences is because when you see everybody sort of move in one direction, like there's the opportunity for the big differences aren't there. So broadly speaking, you should assume that the responses inside the city, outside the city were similar.
Thanks, John.
Most of us are rural folks, so we sometimes don't have a feel for what's happening with the more
Sure.
urban.
Sure. Yeah, they were inside the city of Sandy. They were enthusiastic about this as they were outside. The messages that resonated were consistent across the geography of the district.
You know, John, I would imagine that the one that probably does have a different flavor to it is in terms of the responses to the Furwood station and the operations of the Furwood volunteer station. That was one that we threw in there knowing that a lot of residents of the district would know absolutely nothing about it.
I'm guessing a lot of the people who live in Sandy don't even know what it is.
Doesn't know what it is, and so we got that, you know, a third of respondents in that said that they didn't know anything about it, had no opinion. But those who did know about it strongly supported, you know, the current activities, around the Furwood station. And so it had a level of intensity to it, so that I think, you know, was one of the areas that we really tried to dive in on.
Well, I also believe if this survey was done in August, your wildland concern would be a lot higher than this one too.
Right.
No question.
I think your rules that you brought up, your 5 rules, I think those are really important to stay focused on. And the one, you know, we said that you have to be able to see a need, that this is the taxpayers voting on, us have to be able to see a need. Right now, we are very favorable and everything, so I think we're really gonna have to frame that, what the need is, because there's not gonna be a lot of change.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing a really good job, and that's, I mean, I think that goes to credit everybody, so we're gonna have to frame that pretty good, because there isn't. Somebody's gonna say, let's pay more, and again, I'm being the critic, and but let me pay more, but nothing's gonna. Right now.
Yeah.
So we have to frame that pretty closely on what, because that's the message that we don't wanna give, but that's, could be the message people read is, it's going really good. I don't really wanna pay for, what am I paying for?
The reality is it can't continue like it is for very much longer, right? And so folks are really satisfied with the service levels that they have. You know, we are putting some direct benefits out there into the community, but what you see in this survey is that folks are essentially ready to get engaged, if not married, you know, right off the bat. And some of the best performing messages that we have are around the stability, the predictability of the funding. And, you know, it's not usually within the fire services kind of MO to message the sky is falling. You know, the fire service wants to just deliver cost-effective, you know, value-based services to the community and do it as efficiently as possible. You know, but the reality is that costs are increasing, right? And they're increasing for fire protection just in the same way that they're increasing in a lot of other government services. However, what is different about, you know, we see this in the survey here, is that, you know, Oregonians and particularly folks in the Sandy district value fire services at a level, you know, that actually exceeds any and all other government services. You know, it is a bit of a nuanced message, but I wouldn't be afraid of leaning on the, you know, the message of we are headed in a positive direction with our fire services here. We have a great working model that we want to improve upon, but if we don't act, we risk significant cuts to services, major tax increases in other ways. You'll see that in some of the conceptual community meeting boards, we actually have we've actually kind of written out why the Sandy Fire District can't just operate its own fire department moving forward. You know, or what the cost impacts would be.
Cause did we see those?
We did, well, we're actually showing them to you for the first time in this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, so they haven't been printed yet, right? Okay, so you're about to see them.
Ryan, Director
Sorry.
Fox had a.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that I'm listening to my fellow board members, and I think that the big issue is not the implementation, but it's the messaging. Because if we message out that it's going to right now be 218, the millage rate up to 240, but then actually it's going to end up turning out to be 292, we're gonna look like a bunch of liars. Like, well, we need to message that out, and as a PR firm, you're paying to do this. It's your responsibility to help us message that.
Here's my
Notice
advice.
that as a good likely possibility that that's coming down the line.
You know, I would just tell you that my strong advice would be that if you're going to proactively message a 292 rate, given the fact that it won't actually be collected, you might as well just try to collect the 292 right now. And tack a levy, you know, onto the measure. Because that's what people are gonna hear. But the reality is that it's just not true to say, it isn't true at all to say that the rate will jump to 292. Because Clackamas Fire could change the levy rate, they could reduce it, they could increase what their ask is.
Government's never reduced.
You know, I have seen 3 examples of reductions.
But these are, these are our neighbors.
Yeah.
And so when we're telling our neighbors and our friends that this is what it's gonna go to from 218 to 240, they're like, okay, well, that's good, but it ends up going to 292. They're gonna be upset at us,
So,
which is fine, we just need to message it out correctly.
And I think to balance it out, again, to balance it out, where we're heading with our equipment, we don't have enough, we're not gonna have enough to fund our capital expenditures coming down the road, the cost of personnel is increased, blah, 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 and we're behind the 8 ball, right? I mean, it's to get both those things out there.
What I would say is having, I've done a few of these, is you're right, you need to tell people. But you don't necessarily have to make it the center of your messaging. It does need to be out there, but that is gonna be the reality, is that it goes to 240. And if it goes to 292, they will have voted to do that, along with everybody else in Clackamas. You're gonna run into people that you can have the conversation that we're having here. Most people aren't gonna notice it. They're not gonna be engaged. They don't know what that millage rate is right now. When you tell them the 218, 240, they don't know what a millage rate is, they don't know what theirs is, and they got no idea. So I think what Chris is saying is you can't get too far into the weeds, or you'll suck everybody in. And if you make that the message, that's the number people are gonna see. You don't wanna hide it, but you don't really wanna put it on the top of the billboard either. I guess, it's a balance. You need to get the information out there to make sure people know, because there's always downsides of elections.
And Chris, if I can, I'm speaking the most about it, is I did not want that to be number one, number two, whatever. I just wanted it to be in there, okay? There's so much more benefits and, positive and negatives, whatever. But just to have it that it's there, okay? I had to go back to things I heard about 10 years ago plus when we had the high school bond here, which was huge. And then there was things that weren't disclosed at the time, whatever. Anyway. Thank you for.
Your community, and you are expressing your concerns. This is awesome.
I agree with Ron and Mark, and basically everyone, that I think it does need to be included in the messaging, but I think that it can be done in a way that can be positive, because you saw the messaging that you put up there when you did the survey of, if it goes up 24 cents per thousand, and it includes staffing, additional staffing and more firefighters from 12 hours to 24, you saw that jump. So people like hearing that. Okay, if we pay more, we get more. And I think Andrew said it. You can do the same with the levy. If a levy is passed 3 years from now in 2028 and it generates, X amount, well, what would the community could even get more additional staffing? And yes, the chief's not gonna commit, but it's gonna be something. Obviously, it could be huge, because that's double even what the tax increase is from just the millage rate going up. So I think needs to be mentioned, but it could be mentioned that there are more services that could be derived from it, just like Jay said. And I think that 91% number that you said, the Clackamas residents responded to that you never see a number like that. Well, I think it just shows why we're here, is because those 12 communities and 12 previous fire departments of all those people that you surveyed from around us all remember that they were here one day, and that's why our positive rate, I think, is going to be higher than any other department around, is because you got, just like Jay said, well, they could only staff the main station with 2, well, now they got 3 stations staffed. Well, one of those is because we partnered with Eagle Creek. So I think it just shows the members of our community why that number is so high. It's because they've been there before. I think it shows and it validates what we're doing. So I just wanted to make those points.
Good. All right, so I think that what you'll see when we walk through the display boards is you'll see on slide 7. We have a line that addresses this, but we're going to be adding an additional line that says what Clackamas Fire's current levy rate is, when it expires, and we'll say that Sandy residents will have the opportunity to vote on that when it is up for renewal.
Chris, should we put that slide up so they can see it? Or
Do we have it
also
right
have
here?
it on the FAQ as well.
It's also on the FAQ document. Slide 7, we just did slide 7. So that third bullet is where we would add. Sandy residents would not be required to pay the current Clackamas Fire levy rate of 52 cents per thousand is what we will include in there, which was passed in 2022. And I guess what we would say is. Probably put a period there and say Clackamas Fire District will likely. Refer a renewal of this levy in 2027, and Sandy residents will have the opportunity to vote on it.
Something to that effect.
Right. So that way we're acknowledging it, we're being transparent with it. Again, I just think that this is one of those ones where we gotta put the information out there and we need to do one step at a time. So it's not uncommon in the work that we do, often usually it's school districts who say, hey, so we're going out for this levy, but also we're gonna go out for a bond next year, we think. And so we feel like we need to talk about the levy and the bond. Yeah, I'm just saying, it's always like, no, we do one thing at a time because we can't predict the future. You don't have a bond package developed. You haven't done any of the previous work on it. You know, Clackamas Fire may need to make operational changes by 2027 that would require reconfiguring of the entire levy message. But at that point, if Clackamas Fire is going out for a levy renewal in the hypothetical, scenario we're discussing here, they'll also be out in Sandy, talking with Sandy residents about the renewal, doing that education, talking about what it funds, what Clackamas Fire might do if that levy is renewed. All of that happens at just a later phase. So, nobody's just going to be surprised, or they shouldn't be just surprised in getting a ballot, that says, do you want to renew this levy? But again, it would be, upon annexation, it would be presented to Sandy residents as a renewal. But again, I just think that we want to try to make this as simple as possible.
There's a lot of, I think that in the Sandy area here, the school. Really left a lot of people questioning their government out here because there was a lot of misinformation.
That and the water treatment plant now that's.
So there's a lot of things that aren't really, have been upfront. And so I think that gives us, I'm glad to see the statistics that you have, but there's a lot of opposition of trusting the things that are put out. So I guess that's where we just want to make sure that people are informed correctly. Because it is, it's potential for a 30%. And that's a significant millage rate change.
Yeah, I'm gonna break character here for a second and just say I was shocked, right? In the Sandy community to see a survey come back with this much support and this much of a positive approval rating for any government agency. And this level of support for something that would have a tax impact with it. What I would tell you is, DHM ran a similar survey for us in 2022 around Clackamas Fire's overall district-wide levy, and they pegged it right on the nose. So we started that survey at 62%, we passed it with 62%. And we've seen, similar results, in the past in terms of the predictive modeling of that. So I would tell you to have confidence that yes, voters may be upset at the school district, they might be upset at the city, they might be upset at the state, or the water district or any other entity. But the findings that we're seeing here is they trust the Sandy Fire District Board, they trust Clackamas Fire as a service provider. They want you to do this. They want you to, proceed with an annexation. So I think that, staying confident in that is a really important posture.
But again, I'm confident in the whole thing, and just what you said is, they trust us, which the numbers show that they do. We're just trying to pass that information along. And I think you've heard us, we're kind of going over the same thing. They have that in there as part of the message. It does not need to be number 1, 2, it's just in there. The benefits far outweigh.
This meets the intent, right? If we throw that in there and it's on a billboard and there's talking points and I'm talking about it or Steve's talking about it, one of us is talking about it, it's there, it's open, transparent to where there's nothing that comes back. Like that meets the intent, right? Sweet.
Okay.
I like that.
Great. Any other questions for John before we let him go? We're just gonna did we already let him go?
No, he's still on.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Hey, John, will you convey our appreciation to Phoebe as well. Phoebe worked quite a bit on this survey.
I sure will. Yeah, and of course, if there's questions, reach out, holler. We'll be here. We want you to be successful, and we'll do what we can to ensure that happens.
Thank you, John.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Great. I think we're gonna try to address some of like the other lingering questions that I'm sure folks have as we move forward. Yeah.
Well, as I was just thinking, because we have the ability to add the levy from day one, 52 cents, but we wouldn't add the bond because just like in the case of the mooring annexation, Chris being the leader out there of that campaign that mooring be added on with the bond because they were benefiting from it. So we did. And it passed, but in this case, can we add the levy from day one? And yes, it's more, but then I think you could equate what that more gets right out of the chute, just like you did. The 12-hour unit goes to 24. Well, it added the levy. Well, now you're not worried about the messaging because it's there. This is the rate that includes the levy, and here's all the stuff you get for it. I guess I just throw that out there, that we have the ability to do that.
I couldn't agree with you more. We do, and as both electeds, you guys could guide us to do it. As the fire chief, we just went through polling with this and the information we just got, that's quantifiable data that is based on the process of what we did at 240 versus going in at 292.
That might be a lot for people to swallow.
I'm always a big fan of getting a runner on base rather than trying to hit a grand slam.
Yeah, and I agree. I totally agree. I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah.
That it is an option that we could do, but I would agree.
I would take it in steps.
Take the steps.
Yeah, I mean, the one he's referencing in, when we did the mooring annexation, I requested that the board put on there, because that was 2016, they passed the bond in 2015. They hadn't taken delivery of the first vehicle yet. And I said, we're gonna get all the advantage of that bond. It's only fair that we pay for it. Because we've gotten the same use of those fire engines as anybody else. This one's different. For one, it's way bigger. I mean, it's 5 times as much. And it's configured way differently. We're halfway through it. I just think it would be a big ask. And I would much rather get this one through, and then we take the levy out as a levy by itself, with hopefully the people of Sandy believe in it as much as everybody else in Clackamas does, and it passes. But I think 2 steps is what they're
Did
eligible.
you say we have 17,000 voters or citizens?
Residents.
I don't know what our voting numbers are.
Was it 1? Yeah, I can't remember.
In the
No, there was 17,000 residents. I just can't remember.
Yeah, so I
Looked
think,
at that. I can't remember.
I think we're at like a high 11s.
That might be,
I would say.
yeah, no, I think it was the other way. You're right.
And so I agree with that, for a few reasons, because one, what we're doing is we're changing tax base rates. That's what the annexation mechanism does, is it brings Sandy to Clackamas Fire's base rate. Now, again, if we're doing that, taking that step, I would say that we talk about the base rate tax impact, because that's what we're actually asking voters to do, which is to join Clackamas Fire District and move to that base tax rate. And then we talk about the levy separately. So I would not try to give somebody the impression of, I think I heard somebody say, well, it's 240 now, but it's really gonna be 292. I actually think that's a confusing message to give. Because I think that you need to talk about them separately, right? So we would be moving from Sandy's current base tax rate of 218 to Clackamas Fire's base tax rate of 240. Then we can also provide information to say Clackamas Fire District also has a supplemental enhanced services levy, right? That rate is currently 52 cents per thousand. we would expect that Clackamas Fire will go out to renew that, but they're not charging it to Sandy ratepayers right now. And if they go out for that renewal, Sandy voters would have the opportunity, just like every other resident in the district, to vote yes or no on it.
Yeah, I think it's all we're asking. Yeah.
And that's exactly what I was saying earlier, it's like, we just need help with the messaging.
Yeah.
Because we don't wanna come across as, oh, it's just gonna be a little bit, but then it's a little bit and a little bit more.
That's,
You know, and that's not fair. That's not fair.
that's the message.
Yeah.
I
That's the
think what you
message.
just said sounded really good.
Yeah, I think we're both like, that's it. There you go.
Who's the PR guy?
Yeah, you can be our guy. That's right there, Chris. That's the message. Right
Part of it is we just haven't gotten there, so we haven't shown you all the materials yet, moving slow. I think that Shelby, I can pick up in my slide process. Let's go to slide number 4 in the deck that I sent you. And we'll toss things over to Lindsay here very quickly.
Oh,
Nope, not that deck, the other deck. Sandy X Clackamas Fire slides. Thanks, Shelby. All right, so here, just a reminder, kind of here's the process that we're on. We started by just looking at, okay, what are the options? That's where you began before you even talked to us. And then we've been working on developing a community engagement process and a research process. We talked through some of that. The next step will be actually engaging the community. We've done the quantitative survey, but what we mean by surveys here is a qualitative survey as well that Lindsay will talk about, as well as a couple open houses. Then the next step is you have to actually finalize, draft up what would be in front of voters in terms of the ballot package. That's something that I'll get to here in a second. And then ultimately a round of community education, which typically, people think of as a campaign. Although, it'd be a non-advocacy, straight up informational campaign, unless, except for elected leaders, community members who may want to weigh in on it and, whether or not the union would decide to do anything with the measure, leading up to a public vote in 2025. Go ahead, next slide. So I wanted to just chat with you briefly about measure development. It is just a little bit early, but I wanted to give you a sense of how we'd recommend you go about that process. So in terms of timing, we think that this is something that you would want to consider following the conclusion of both the qualitative survey and the open houses. Again, more questions about that to be answered in a second. We want to focus on aligning the actual measure and the language and the information that we're presenting within kind of a 4th grade readability level so that it's accessible to all community members. But to do that in a way that aligns with what we've learned through both the quantitative survey, the qualitative survey, and feedback received at the open houses, so that we're really answering those core questions in the community, but in a way that aligns with their values and priorities. Having clear, and getting back to the cost impacts, clearly stating the cost impacts. We think that hiding the football when it comes to ballot measures around what the actual cost would be is a losing game always. So we want to be transparent, very clear up front. A lot of people will just skim through their ballot measures and go, okay, how much does it cost, right? And they get down to it. So we want to be able to not only state the cost impact in terms of the levy rate increasing, but then also put it in terms that the average person can understand. The median homeowner, at this assessed value is going to pay a little less than $5 a month. Or an annual, or the corresponding annual figure. And then clearly state the benefits around the annexation. That'll take a few different forms. So kind of for anybody not familiar with it, just ballot measure 101 here. There is a ballot title And that is 10 words or less that just states what the title would be. So when you're on your ballot, you just see it right there. Then there's a ballot question. That ballot question has to be no more than 20 words. And so there's a bit of an art and a science to try to make sure that you get all the legally required language in a way that people can understand that actually matches the intent of what we're trying to do here. And then there is a measure summary. The measure summary is very factual, neutral based. I'm forgetting what the word count is, but we're, in like the 100-ish, word sort of range there. And then the measure explanatory statement, that's actually submitted by the referring body. So in this case, it would be the Sandy Fire District Board of Directors would have the opportunity to essentially attach its name to an explanatory statement. That's where you get to the why are we doing this? So, the ballot title is sort of like at the highest level, what would this do? The question is like, here's what we'd like to do. Could you say yes to it? The summary is like, here are the impacts, in a very factual way. And then that explanatory statement is, hey, here's why we need this. And that's where you can get into persuasion. The first three have to be completely non-persuasive. That fourth piece is where you get persuasive. This is something that we have a lot of experience in doing. And I would, suggest that 99% of the time when we do this, there's been one time where a board has said, well, actually, we want our attorney to draft it first, and then we kind of work with the attorney on the back end. But most of the time, we'll just take everything that we've heard in terms of the feedback from you, try to get really factual, and then just prepare an initial draft that then goes to the board. And it gives you an opportunity to kind of play with it, see how it feels, especially on the explanatory statement. Does it match your voice? Does it match the community? Looking through the summary, okay, are we being incredibly factual? Have we left anything out? We want to include anything more? That process tends to take anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, depending on how quickly you want to move through it. And we would just align it with either your regular meeting schedules, or if necessary, put an ad hoc meeting on there. Make sure that there's adequate public notice so the public can see what it is that you're considering. And then you need to have that referred out in August in order to meet the deadlines. We would encourage you to refer it out in July so that you can get out the door early and everybody can take a nice early August vacation. Not me, I won't be taking a vacation in August, so I'll be working. Any questions on just the measure development of the process? This would also be the time to say that you guys would rather just write it yourselves. Oh, and the other thing I should just add is, if necessary, we can bring legal counsel to review it. The ultimate, I wouldn't say the ultimate arbiter, but the primary arbiter of submissions for the ballot is the Clackamas County Clerk. So we would just, usually we just work to resolve any issues directly with the county clerk. They don't normally happen, we're compliant when we go in. But if we have questions, just because it's there is some nuance to Oregon annexation laws and stuff. So if we had questions, we would just bring in legal counsel to address that. All right, next question here. Or next slide, sorry, Shelby, thanks. You went away. So again, like I think we've heard a bunch, residents are the ultimate decision makers here. So focusing on them, you just heard about the scientific survey. We want to walk with you through the text of a qualitative survey that we'd like to send out. And generally, it focuses on some of those core issues, right? What's your satisfaction with fire services? Help us rank some priorities for future investments. Opinions on potential annexation. But it provides opportunities in a much more open-ended way. So a qualitative survey is different than a quantitative survey in the sense that we won't necessarily look at raw number counts because people self-select in, and where DHM works really hard and it costs a lot of money to be able to make sure that we're getting a scientifically accurate sample of what the ultimate electorate will look like. The qualitative public survey is just open to anybody who wants to take it. We will be asking folks to input their zip code. so that there's a screen, so we at least, they have to complete that hurdle in order to get access to the survey. Now, in theory, if I, lived in Japan, and I wanted to input the Sandy zip code to be able to take the survey, I could probably do that, right? So I'm just letting you know some of the risks with these types of open public surveys. But, what it does do is it gives us a bit of a heat map. So if we see a bunch of people giving kind of the same open-ended responses, we know that there might be a handful of folks in the community who are concerned about one thing. It also gives you a chance to kind of see whether there's any pockets of potential opposition to the measure. Again, we see a bunch of responses that are saying essentially the same thing in the same way. It gives us a signal that maybe there's a group of folks who are, talking about it, and we'd like to understand a little bit about what their opinions are and where they're coming from. It also helps us in terms of the rank order prioritization. We're going to ask a couple questions, and Lindsay will get to this, where we ask not only for folks to say what their top priority is, but then we give them a bunch of different priorities, and we ask them to rank them in order. So that it tells us, well, okay, this might be the top priority, but these other two are really kind of close in terms of the rank order prioritization. So again, open houses, and then I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay here. Yeah.
Is there an actual date for the May open house?
Yes, May 3rd.
Oh,
I'm sorry, what?
May 3rd.
May 3rd.
yeah. So on Saturday, May 3rd, we'll be holding our first open house from 10 to 12 across the street at the beautiful Sandy Fire Station. And then on Saturday, June 7th, we'll be holding a identical open house at the Furwood Fire Station. The reason we do open houses rather than community meetings is because people like to go to fire station open houses. It's amazing. We don't struggle to get folks coming in when you tell them that there are going to be activities for the kids. We're going to pull the fire trucks out. It's really casual. You can just walk through, have conversations directly, with local firefighters and fire leadership. I believe that Sparky the dog is going to be making an appearance. Is that true? Am I able to confirm Sparky yet?
Not 100% confirmation, but it's in the works.
Maybe I'll be Sparky.
Okay, here's what I'm just gonna say. Sparky the dog will be there. If I'm allowed one executive decision, the one executive decision I would make is we will have the mask on. The balloons, all that rigmarole. Again, at this open house, Liz is gonna review the materials. There will be a series of display boards. We've done this in the past. They work really well in the fire station bays where folks can just kind of walk from station to station, and each station will be staffed by somebody who's there able to answer questions about the material that's on the board. And we'll also have handouts, FAQ handouts. We don't like to do for these types of measures, really slick one-pagers because it looks like you're trying to sell somebody something. Rather, in a measure like this that we see broad community support already off the bat, we just want to create documents that address those frequently asked wording questions. Yeah.
I just have two quick questions. The Furwood Fire Station, is that Dover?
Yes.
Oh, it is. That's how I always hear it called, so I was confused.
We'll
So,
change it to Dover.
Are we changing it to Dover?
Yeah.
Okay.
isn't that what people call it?
The people in our area call it Dover Station.
Okay,
Okay.
so maybe that.
Yes,
And people say Dover Station on Furwood, so just in case anyone's confused.
I have it.
Maybe a Dover / Furwood? Just Dover, Furwood in parentheses? So people know what we're talking about?
Then the other question on the timeline that you showing earlier, because our residents don't have to vote on this, as I understand it, that's been figured out, right? So we don't have to vote on, which is great. It's nice to see that 91% of our residents support it, even without having to vote on it, so that was good.
Well, that's
Well, that's
actually
91%
91% of Sandy fire.
Yeah,
We didn't
Sandy
survey
fire.
anybody else in Clackamas fire.
Oh, I thought somewhere, right?
Yeah, no, that
Where
was
was I? I thought that was the Clackamas residents. So, but I guess my question was, what do we have to do along the way? Do we legally have to refer something, even though it's not voted on, or do we have to go through some legal process?
I think, we'll dive into that exactly, but I would say this would be a support from the board. But I'll get answers on it.
Because I don't remember us not ever having to vote.
What did we do, what did we do with boring, Marilyn, do you remember?
Oh, no, we have to vote on it.
We both had to-
Yeah,
You voted on,
this is the first that I ever remember that there wasn't an election, well,
Yeah. Well,
back when the
Clark.
Metropolitan Boundary Commission used to approve,
We
so there
voted
never used to be
vote for
election.
next Clark, but they had to dissolve first and then we
Yeah,
annexed Clark.
but did you, was that just a board that said, we support this across on our side? Or did it just happen to come into play?
I don't know.
Okay, we'll dive into
Something-
it, exactly. answer.
I think, Jim, it's because of the percentage of people, they have so few versus
Yeah,
how many we have, and boring, at that time, we had fewer.
yeah, yeah. I understand
It
that
it
part.
could be a consensus.
I just didn't know what we have to do.
Yeah.
It has to, I have to go back a few years, and Brian probably can remember more than I can, but there's a difference between a merger and an annexation, and I think the merger part was because it was a impact to Clackamas of like 0.8 cents per thousand or something like that, even though it was very small, it was, still has to go to vote because it had to do with money. But if there's no impact, if there's no money impact, then I don't. How am I doing?
If I may, and I can't find the email offhand, we did ask this question of legal. And we did get an opinion that we do not need to go to a vote. There are a couple of procedural steps, and I just can't find it and quick enough reference for it, but we can certainly follow up with that.
We'll get that answer.
The estimate of the Clackamas voters have to vote for it,
Correct.
but this one you got the Clackamas would not.
Yeah, that was a decision that the organization made to do that.
Because I'm not sure that we would have had to back then.
We didn't. It was the same, it was
It's
the
the
same.
same as this is, we just didn't know it.
Yeah.
So we did, just kind of getting to what Brian was saying. We did solicit multiple legal opinions around how to proceed. So if anybody has spent time in the ORSs around annexations, mergers, consolidation, fire districts, and special districts generally, you'll find that it is an absolute mess. So the legislature has sort of picked at this and done lots of different things with it over the years. And it's very confusing to read. And it does look in a lot of ways like a choose your own adventure game. But not wanting to take anything for granted, we actually sought, I think, 3 different legal opinions on this and ultimately came up with the pathway that we have right now, which is that Sandy Fire is able to refer to voters and the Clackamas Fire Board is able to vote to accept, but that the full vote doesn't have to take place amongst Clackamas Fire District. And there were various reasons for that within the legal reasoning. I'd be happy to share that if somebody had a question on it. But in terms of the legal process of whether it's anticipatory or right after the vote, I can't recall either, and we will just get clarification on
Yeah, we'll circle back.
that. Before we run out of time here, I'd like for Lindsay to be able to review these materials.
Okay, shall we keep up the FAQ first?
And really quickly, just a procedural thing, in the event that we do hit 5 o'clock, I need some help from the experts in the room. I believe we can convene a regular board meeting, recess it and continue the work session, correct?
Unless it's been messaged that way. It has to be messaged that way 24 hours in advance.
We have 19 minutes. How about
Let's
let's see if we can get.
Let's roll. Yeah, that's all.
All right.
So like Chris was saying, this FAQ will be used in a variety of ways. This is a basic one pager that is simply best practice. It makes sure that everyone is on the same page, everyone is receiving the same information. And so we imagine this will be distributed in a variety of different ways. One is the open houses. We'll have this at the fire stations in Sandy. We also are close to finishing a website that will have these questions and answers on it, which will be you'll be able to access through a QR code. It'll be on the Clackamas Fire website as well, so you'll be able to take a look. So there will be a variety of ways that folks can access this information, and we will be actively promoting it as well. And so these questions in terms of what we're asking, are the basics that we think people will want to know.
Did you want FAQs?
FAQs, you were on it, you were
Okay.
great.
After I did FAQs, I was like, maybe she wanted boards.
No, that's good.
So thank you to Steve and Brian for their input on these questions and answers as well. I've already made a few notes on actual things that I want to change. That being said, we asked, how did this partnership come about? Talking about when this current service agreement expires, which I'm going to change. Asking why does Sandy Fire actually contract with Clackamas Fire? That's, a big question, is why can't Sandy Fire just fund itself? Talking about when the decision will be made about annexation. The cost, which we will obviously update as well, given our discussion.
And just to clarify, we provided this as well, so have folks seen this in terms of a packet, or do we need to circulate that, Shelby?
This hasn't gone.
Oh, okay.
Again, for our discussion, talking about what other options Sandy Fire has as well, in the case that Sandy Fire is not annexed into Clackamas Fire. We talk about the benefits, the open houses, and then end with kind of the experience of Clackamas Fire kind of engaging in the merger, and whether or not that's a smooth process, and kind of the experience that Clackamas Fire has of doing it prior. So this is a draft, it's a working draft. We have changed FAQs kind of throughout different campaigns, given the questions that we received from the public, how we find folks receive these answers as well. Different populations want different things. So this is the FAQ on annexation, which we can share with you if you guys are curious.
Yes, if, do you have the ability to send that to us?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was like,
Wait, to be my question.
if we're gonna message out something, we need to message out the same message.
Correct.
Instead of everyone's individual.
Yep, so this is a process step that we're
Yes.
going through of just socializing this
This
initiative.
has not been distributed to the public.
It hasn't been distributed or finalized at this point, so we're kind of giving you the first look, everybody the first look at the same exact time. And so we're gonna make changes to this in kind of in real time based on what we've heard already and your feedback.
Awesome,
So
thank you.
I think a draft should go out to folks before it is finalized.
As long as everybody realizes the draft, and so that every detail may not be the same, but I think it would be good for us to have a message.
Yes, of course.
And obviously, these are in spring and early summer. Are you guys gonna be planning on doing more open houses as it gets closer to? If it goes to vote? Are you gonna play it by ear to see kind of?
I think it's a vibe of the community. I think it's a vibe of what you guys are seeing and the pulse rate that we're getting.
Sure.
What we've done in the past is we do this right now, and once it goes to, because this is where we have the opportunity to be raw with the community. The minute that you refer this, our stance is like this, right? So it's more of coming and doing these open houses, or come and look at the fire engine, and hey, you have the opportunity to vote for.
I can just see a lot of Facebook community warriors.
No, they exist.
Putting negative spins on it, just, there's always a few bad apples that are, but people are gonna take that as the information.
Yeah.
Versus,
What-
so if there's opportunity to get the right information.
Completely on point, and what we've done in the past with those situations is we lean on Coastline and we figure out how to respond to that piece.
Sure.
But it's a little bit fluid in the fact of the pulse rate of the community, what we're seeing on social media, what we're seeing on the qualitative survey, and what kind of feedback.
We saw, I was just talking about the contract, let alone an actual burger, so.
Yeah.
Any final questions on the FAQ, how we're gonna use it before we send it out?
I like the section about the experience in mergers, that.
So they're not merged.
John didn't.
Some, there are some merged.
We can, we're right.
What was the correction?
They weren't mergers.
They're not merged.
They were annexations.
Most of them are in fact annexation, several of them are merged. So
We're using.
we always refer to it as legal integration.
Yeah, legal integration. That works.
Because we annexed Milwaukee, Orange City, Clark.
Maybe,
How can you see that, Mary?
could we just use the term
Amazing.
combining?
I can't see.
Because Clackamas
What-
Fire, I didn't-
I can't read anything, that's great.
You can buy them.
It'll come.
I think last year's mine.
I think most people, that's just semantics, annexation, merger, consolidation. I mean, yes,
People
there's,
are looking to nitpick you, the legal ramifications. People aren't gonna
Sure,
go,
that-
yeah.
And that's why we've always used it. It's either contract for service or legal integration. It's kind of our the two comments that makes it generic.
Let's go to the boards, because we have 12 minutes.
So, as Chris was saying about the open houses, we will have a handful of display boards. These really are meant to be visual aids and really not guide the conversation, but rather have leadership be able to take folks to a different board and talk about what the person is actually interested or concerned about or has questions on. And so these boards are basically, they've been developed based on our experience of what folks are asking about. And there's 7 of them, I believe, I think so, yes. We made it today. The first board is the history of Clackamas fire, as well as the history of Sandy fire. We know how proud, both communities are of their fire districts, and so making sure that folks know that there's a story history, in both places, that's important. Number 3. This is about the process, walking folks through the process, usually there's a lot of questions on why, how, and talking about what the timeline actually is. We also want to indicate that we have been working on this for quite some time, so we're not just springing on it, so this is since January, and we will go to November. So this is definitely for folks with questions about how will this actually get on the ballot.
This one, it rotates this way, so it stands up.
Everyone loves a good map. So, and then knowing that Sandy and Clackamas Fire will merge, this will, I'm sure, be a very well-loved visual display that I think a lot of people will kind of gather around. This is basically regurgitating to folks what the survey results were from DHM, talking about what folks in Sandy are really interested in, what they're worried about, just making sure that folks know that we have been asking about their priorities and making sure that the annexation is reflective of those priorities. So making sure that we should have those numbers up there.
15 seconds on that one. Here, if we just go back. So believe it or not, the number one predictor of voting behavior is how your neighbors vote. So more strongly than any other demographic category, age, ethnicity, race, religion, whatever, however you can break it up. Turns out that how your neighbors vote impacts people more, right? So there are Trump voting areas, there are Harris voting areas, right? Like, and it just so happens that all the demographic crosstabs that people split up are just where people self-select how to live, where people live. So it is a really good thing to do when you're trying to educate somebody about it. If you have evidence that something is supported by their friends and neighbors, you want to let them know, right? So I think that it's a really good idea for us to go out and say, hey, we conducted this survey and residents have encouraged us via that survey, to proceed with the annexation. And here are the reasons why they said that they support it. So that way it gives somebody a chance to, look and go, okay, I probably agree with all those reasons why, my neighbors supported the annexation. Or I disagree, right? But at least they've got a perspective on that.
The next display board, again, what we were kind of talking about before, what are voters going to get if they vote to annex into Clackamas Fire? What are the benefits? What's the impact? So we have a few benefits here. that we're able to point to, especially if they have questions on, you know, what are we getting for the increase in cost. Again, the cost, which I will make our edits on, given our conversation, we have a display board that we'll be able to take those to talk about what the cost impact will be on their property taxes for the average homeowner in Sandy. So that will obviously, the last one will reflect in our conversation. This is how to stay informed. We'll have a QR code that goes to the website with the FAQs and or the qualitative survey that I'm about to show you. Again, kind of knowing that there are a variety of different ways that people want to engage, how people prefer to engage. Just trying to give everyone an in on feedback and making sure that.
Sorry, 2 seconds. Love the QR code. Last time we did little business cards. QR codes that way I can hand out to the perfect. We'll give you business cards with the QR codes. So somebody has a question, you can say, here you go. Next slide.
That was the last one.
I think that is. Yep,
That's, there's not many more.
So I have-
you have 7 minutes,
Okay, let's
so
go to the
let's
policy.
do the survey. And again,
Any questions?
we're gonna make some changes or some revisions based on this and
You'll send it.
recirculate it out to everybody.
If you don't have time, we can talk later, but
Yes.
a good time. I think that, to me at least, the elephant in the room is the whole Troutdale Wood Village. There's a possibility of an overtaking or a merger with these other cities. And you talked specifically about how we're going to look with our neighbors. I think that's going to be a big part of this. Are we going, is Clackamas going to look great, or are they going to be looking like the devil?
You know, I hear you on that, Brian, but you know, at this point, everything with those conversations is focused on 2026. And so kind of the immediacy of that, I think 3 weeks ago, I might have said, okay, I'm with you, let's figure out a solution to that. But I think that, you know, that is so ambiguous and it's this whole other thing.
As long as you're aware of it, because I think it is going to possibly, hopefully not, but possibly be an issue in the future. And that's, and because we are, like, we've employed you guys to do this working for us. And I think that might be an issue in the future. I don't know.
Are you wanting the survey?
Yeah, and I just gave you the Word document, if you wanted to drop on, that's fine too.
Oh, you did, you were talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's, these are some of the questions that we have, right? Because Clackamas Fire District is also pursuing an annexation of Gladstone this year as well. But we made a very kind of strategic choice to not message those together because they're two very different communities. Now, when we get to, you know, a wood village, clearly there's much more in common in those communities with Sandy.
Yeah.
But, you know, Gladstone and Sandy, we message those very separately because we don't think that there is this same, you know, I don't know that in Gladstone, it grows support to say, hey, Sandy voters are also thinking about coming in, or in Sandy, it's supposed to say, hey, the Gladstone folks are coming in too. Like, I just think they're.
Yeah, and I don't want to take up time, I know you have limited time, and we have a lot of things to say, but it was just that where you talked about, it's our neighbors, and they are our neighbors, and they have a voice, and so it kind of just depends on how that's messaged also.
I'm working with Shelby and her team to develop a qualitative survey that will be sent out in a variety of different ways. It'll be promoted on social media. We will have QR codes as business cards if people want to give their feedback. Again, this is a way for people to provide direct feedback, especially if they're unable to make the open houses or the virtual webinar that we are planning as well. So this is a way to really kind of talk to folks about what they're thinking, making sure we have a variety of ways to engage the public. These questions include, you know, where do you live, or the zip code question, make sure that we are able to separate folks into both Sandy, Gladstone, and then those in Clackamas Fire who are not members of either community. So we're able to look specifically about where people or how people respond based on where they live. Knowing the quantitative survey, the DHM survey, talked about wildfire risk and how important it is to folks in the community. We wanted to make sure there was a question that elaborated on that so folks can share more specifics. Again, the same question number 3, what would they like to see in the current approach to wildfires? When we go down to question 4, we'll talk about the satisfaction for 4 and 5, how folks are satisfied with the current quality of emergency services, response time. And then with number 6, talking about the specific aspects of fire emergency services is as a priority, and then that will be a select all that apply. We have a rank of non-important to the main priority about response times. Rating response times if they've had to use emergency services in the last few years. And then going down to number 11. We have additional questions for Sandy residents, talking about what the annexation would mean to them, what the benefits are in their opinion. Do they have any concerns? And then if they have concerns, what are they? We also want to rank order concerns from in terms of importance, our main concern to least concern, and we have a variety of different issues that we're asking folks about. And then the last few questions are about how folks would like to be communicated with. What's the best way to reach them? Is it social media? Is it snail mail? Is it open houses? Making sure that people have a way to connect with Sandy or Clackamas.
The reader board on the fire station.
The reader board on the fire station, we have that, yes. And in terms of distribution details, this will go live at the end of the month in time for the open houses, so people in the open houses can take the survey. And they will end in mid-June once the open houses have ended. And then we're gonna be able to kind of look at some of the data and some of the feedback and see if we're missing anything or if we're doing a good job.
All right, 1 minute for feedback.
Mic drop on reading out that information so quickly, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
If there's,
I was just gonna say, do you think that information could be ready by the sports and breakfast? Be a great opportunity to get that information out.
We will make our edits like overnight and then circulate them back to Shelby so that we'll get a draft out. But I think if we can, put a pretty tight deadline on revisions back to us. Now, again, here's what I'd say to folks. We usually have like a version 7 by the time we get to election day on a sheet like this, right? We start off, and then we make iterations as we move forward. So, if you miss kind of the first week, or you think, you wake up in the middle of the night, 10 days from now and think, and we just said this, or we're missing this piece. We want to hear that, and we'll make revisions as they come forward. We just want to make sure that kind of the basic messaging frame is set.
The only input that I would give is maybe, I don't have the language that we needed, but maybe just strengthen what some of the benefits of this annexation is gonna be, because I did really. Today, from what's gonna change today versus when the annexation goes through tomorrow? What does that look like?
I actually think we need to full numbers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Sue, do you want to close
Oh, yeah, I
the
started.
work session?
Okay.
And then thank you, everybody, for being here.
The meeting is adjourned at 5:01.
Perfect.